While there's something to be said for a film that introduces an unforgettable villain right from the jump, the surprise villain is a tried and tested gambit that, when executed well, can elevate an already good movie far into the stratosphere. Just, pick up that ball and go like a home run, just knock it right out of the park. But it's also fair to say that delivering a secret villain that remains a genuine secret until the moment of unmasking is much tougher than it may seem, especially with the audiences of today being so goddamn savvy to all the movie tropes out there, you bunch of clever clogs you. And so, it's incredibly common for viewers en masse to figure out these things long before the movie wants them to. In extreme cases, even gleaning it from the trailer, or maybe even a casting announcement before shooting has even started. While there's nothing wrong with foreshadowing doing its job, as far as these movies are concerned, well, they thought they were being much cleverer than they actually were. I'm Ewan, this is Whatculture, and here are a whole bunch of secret movie villains everyone saw coming. First up, High T. Men in Black International. The marketing for Men in Black International centered around the hunt for a mole within the shadowy organization, and in basically record time, many fans predicted that said mole would end up being Liam Neeson's character High T, the head of MIB's London branch. Nobody else in the cast would have made much impact as a surprise villain, and in all honesty, casting an actor of Neeson's stature as a throwaway figurehead just seemed like a huge waste otherwise. In fact, High T was such an obvious prime suspect that some assumed he'd actually end up being a red herring, only for the real mole to be someone else entirely. But yeah, no, most fans were right the first time. We eventually learned that High T's body has been taken over by the alien parasites known as the Hive, allowing them to infiltrate MIB. Yeah, it's such a blatantly telegraphed reveal that most were simply left waiting the better part of 2 hours for the other shoe to drop. Next up, Dr. Mann. Interstellar. The third act of Christopher Nolan's sci-fi epic Interstellar features a surprise supporting appearance from prolific cameo maker Matt Damon, who plays Dr. Mann, the third and final scientist who claims to have found a potentially habitable Earth for humanity's relocation. But once Matthew McConaughey's coupe and the crew of the Endurance rouse Mann from cryostasis, it's soon enough revealed that he falsified the data in the hopes of being rescued. He subsequently attempts to kill Coop and escape the planet, though is himself killed during a failed docking procedure. Happens to the best of us. And just about everyone saw this one coming, considering that Damon wasn't featured in any of the film's marketing, implying a degree of secrecy over the nature of his role. And what could merit more secrecy than a surprise villain turn? It just wouldn't have made much sense to have an A-lister like Damon play a relatively minor scientist character in one of the biggest sci-fi films of the 2010s. Of course, there was more to his character than what was being let on. Next up, Detective Shank. Spiral. It's Saw time! It's my perfect rendition of the Saw theme, you're welcome. So yeah, what would a Saw movie be without a surprise villain twist? And while most of the previous entries at least managed to catch audiences off guard a wee bit with their reveals, 2021's soft reboot Spiral, well and truly whiffed it. Even if you ignore the fact that many fans predicted Detective William Shank, played by Max Minghella, would be the new Jigsaw killer on account of his thoroughly just off vibes, the movie itself sealed the deal by committing a cardinal sin for the franchise. When Shank is killed halfway through the film, it happens off screen. And if we know anything about Saw, it's that the victim's final moments are always shown for us to, ravenously feast over. Couple this with the fact that Shank's corpse was oh so conveniently skinned, and it was incredibly easy to figure out that he faked his own death in order to cover his own tracks. And so, when the big twist is revealed a good while later, it lands with basically no impact. Unsurprisingly, the franchise hasn't bothered following up with Shank in the 5 years since Spiral's release. Next up, Martin Krebs, Jurassic World Rebirth. Where Jurassic World Rebirth's Martin Krebs is concerned, we don't want to say, you know, just look at him, but yeah, just look at him. An executive at a pharmaceutical company means that, both in the movies and real life, there's about a 99.8% chance he's a very, very bad man. Or at least, you know, really annoying. I mean, come on, his name, like, it's one rewrite away from being called Villain McBadface Bad Dude Man. You know, it's just, you can smell the slime oozing out of him. Said slime is visible from the moment he rocks up and offers Zora, played by Scarlett Johansson, a job collecting genetic material from dinosaurs, and over the years, Rupert Friend has proven himself a dab hand at playing, you know, really smug, obnoxious movie characters. So with all that in mind, it's no surprise at all that Krebs places virtually no value on the human lives endangered while trying to secure the dinosaur samples in question. And when he finally goes full mask-off villain later in the movie, it's a joy to watch him get gobbled up by the Distortus Rex. I mean, I say it's a joy. The Distortus Rex is still one of the most, like, one of the all-time top 10 embarrassing word combinations that's come out of my mouth. And I say a lot of embarrassing things, so, you know, what's wrong with a good old Spinosaurus getting him, you know? Just get him in those big chompers and go rah, rah, rah. That's what I want. Next up, Evelyn Deavor, Incredibles 2. Incredibles 2 writer and director Brad Bird apparently thought he was being pretty slick by revealing that the villainous screenslaver is actually the quote-unquote benevolent tech genius, is there even such a thing, Evelyn Deavor, played by Catherine Keener. But considering how many folks swiftly noticed that Evelyn Deavor sounds a whole lot like Evil Endeavor, it was pretty easy to assume that she was gonna be the big bad. Even accepting that Bird tried to bait and switch audiences by positioning her brother Winston, played by Bob Odenkirk, as the more typical secret villain, a lot of viewers quickly saw through this and knew who was really under the mask. As it turns out, Winston knows absolutely nothing about his sister's actions and has an entirely earnest motivation. He's just a superhero fanboy who wants to rehabilitate their tarnished image. Incredibles 2 is still a decent enough Pixar sequel, though its big reveal was thunderously predictable, even for the standards of the ever-expected Disney surprise baddie. Next up, James Costa, Taking Lives. 2004's psychological thriller Taking Lives was largely rubbished by critics for, among other things, being immensely predictable. The plot follows FBI profiler Ileana Scott, played by Angelina Jolie, as she leads the hunt for an elusive serial killer called Martin Asher, who assumes the identity of his victims. The film opens with a 1983 set prologue where a teenage Asher is portrayed by Quentin Tarantino's arch-nemesis Paul Dano, before the story leaps forward 21 years to the present day. From this, it's fair to deduce that Asher is now a man in his mid to late 30s, and while there are admittedly a few name actors in the cast who fit that bill, such as Kiefer Sutherland and Olivia Martinez, it's simply far more on brand for a thriller of this build to make the secret killer Scott's love interest, James Costa, here played by Ethan Hawke. Even accepting that the serial killer role was something of an against typecasting for Hawke at the time, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense for an actor of his profile and caliber to be playing anything but the villain, and that he was. And for his own part, Hawke called Taking Lives terrible in a 2011 interview, and yeah, having seen it, it ain't no 7, I gotta tell ya. Next up, Howard Clifford, Detective Pikachu. Detective Pikachu's big bad is eventually revealed to be Howard Clifford, the aged creator of Rhyme City and founder of Clifford Industries, whose master plan involves merging humans and Pokemon, which, that sounds like someone's weird little Tumblr mood board, like, fantasy, if I'm being honest, and not really a supervillain plot, but I'm getting sidetracked. But if the idea of, you know, Pokemon body horror wasn't enough to get you going, well, we also have him having plotted to have Tim's father Harry killed when he found out about the scheme in question. But like, come on, why else would you cast an actor of Bill Nighy's repute in a damn Pokemon movie if he's not gonna do some evil, I'm Bill Nighy monologuing, you know? That's why you get him in. Nighy can nail a role like this in his sleep, and considering that his character also happens to be a big corporate honcho, it was incredibly easy to finger him as the ultimate antagonist. Really glad there was an additional few words after that last bit. Swiftly moving on. Next up, Rob Mercy. The new sci-fi thriller Mercy revolves around Detective Chris Raven, played by Chris Pratt, who's accused of murdering his wife and given 90 minutes to prove his innocence to an AI judge, Maddox, played by Rebecca Ferguson, who will immediately execute him if he fails to do so. It's clear that Chris is being set up, but by who? And how? And when? I mean, G, do you think it could be the only other actor of note in the movie apart from Chris Pratt and Rebecca Ferguson? Do you think it might be that guy? Mr. Amazon Prime? Do you think it, hey, come back here, Amazon Prime, get back here, I'm not done talking to you, get back here. Yeah, when we find out that Chris was framed by his AA sponsor Rob, played by the great Chris Sullivan, in revenge for his own brother being executed by the Mercy Court, which Chris himself championed, it's basically a foregone conclusion. Granted, this is probably only the 5th or 6th worst thing about the movie, but as much as we all love Chris Sullivan, it would have been smarter to cast a lesser-known actor in this particular role. Next up, Peter Banning, F1. Tobias Menzies is a very good actor who just so happens to be exceptional at playing sniveling villains. And so the moment he showed his face in F1 and director Joseph Kosinski started lingering on him just a little bit longer than necessary, it seemed dead obvious where everything was going. And indeed, Menzies plays APXGP board member Peter Banning, who later reveals that he not only orchestrated Sonny's signing to the team with the belief that he would sabotage it, and followed up by forging documents claiming the team's upgrades were illegal. Finally, because he's not quite enough of a mustache-twirling villain yet, he then offers Brad Pitt's character extra compensation if he allows the team to fail. And while we might not know all the particulars of Banning's scheme when he first shows up, his very essence exudes bureaucratic villainy every single second he's on screen. Now, granted, F1 isn't trying to deviate far from the traditional sports movie formula, but even so, Menzies' antagonist was predictable to a generic fault. Next up, Martin Vanger, the girl with the dragon tattoo. For anyone who hadn't read The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or seen the previous Swedish adaptation, it should have been theoretically pretty tricky to figure out the identity of the central serial killer in question. But David Fincher arguably made things a teensy bit obvious by casting the brilliant Stellan Skarsgård in the role of murderous antagonist Martin Vanger. Above all else, while the film does feature a number of Swedish actors in small supporting roles, Skarsgård is the only Swedish actor to play a major character with a substantial screen time. Couple this with Skarsgård being a highly respected actor with a history of playing complex characters, all while portraying a character here who is a CEO with all the resources to kill undetected, and it's easy to see him as the probable culprit. I mean, yeah, who knew that the superficially charming rich guy played by a member of Swedish acting royalty might be the baddie all along? Good movie though. I mean, I know that people call this like a comfort watch, which is, you know, you do you, but yeah, great adaptation all around, really like it. Not my all-time favorite David Fincher movie, but you know, it's like a solid top 5 in his directing oeuvre. Next up, Christian, Megan 2.0. Say it loudly, say it twice. If all else fails, it's gonna be the boyfriend. While Megan 2.0's main villain appears to be android Amelia, played here by Ivana Sakno, there inevitably had to be a human being pulling the strings from behind the scenes. And this individual is eventually revealed to be Gemma's love interest and business partner, Christian, played by Aristotle Athari. In the third act, we learn that he's actually responsible for Amelia's creation, which was a gambit to stir up anti-AI sentiment and help him lobby the G20 leaders to legislate against it. Christian is introduced early in the film as a cybersecurity expert, but his presence in the story feels so utterly and blandly perfunctory that it's howlingly clear that there has to be something more going on with him. And that there certainly was. It's just a shame that he's still like a woefully dull bad guy whose presence adds basically nothing to a wildly overlong and misguided sequel. On the way, Edwin, Predators. anymore. There are certain themes that just come up in a list, and I have to just get it out. I have to just get the Predator theme out there, because it's a banger. Anyway, Predators, what a weird movie. Well, you can't say that casting Topher Grace as a vicious serial killer in Predators was an inherently obvious thing to do. For anyone who gave the story much critical thought, it should have been clear where things were going. The film revolves around a group of strangers who find themselves hunted down by predators on an alien world, with the group consisting of soldiers, assassins, death row inmates, and so on and so forth. Basically, everyone in the group is a big bad killer. Apparently, save for Grace's character Edwin, a doctor whose presence among the set becomes a mystery from early on. And to employ a little bit of the old Occam's razor here, what would make more sense than the seemingly harmless Edwin actually being a secret killer himself? After all, everything we know about the Predators says that they pick worthy adversaries for their hunt, so what could they possibly want with a squirrely doctor? Between this and his early identification of a poisonous neurotoxin on a plant, it shouldn't have been all that surprising when Edwin eventually revealed himself to be a vicious serial killer. On the way, the director, Nimona. Now, to be totally fair to Netflix's generally terrific animated film Nimona, it at least doesn't save its big villain reveal for the very end of the movie, instead confirming that the director of the Institute, Francis Conroy, is the real antagonist just 40 minutes in. At this point, we're shown video footage confirming that Queen Valorant's death was caused by the director secretly swapping out Ballister's sword. Well, let's be honest. She had a bad guy stamped on her forehead from the very first scene. In her first interaction with Ballister, she straight up says, "Today, the kingdom will see you for who you really are," which feels like nothing if not a little bit mildly threatening. Entirely, just kind of being like, hey, that seems like a weird thing to say, Thanks, director. I don't feel threatened right now, at all. Then there's her dismissive demeanor towards Ballister once he's imprisoned, and the several reaction shots which linger just a little too long on her face to not mean something. But again, at least Nimona had the good sense to get this reveal out of the way early, so viewers didn't spend the rest of the movie simply waiting for the penny to drop. Next up, Wayne and Quinn Bailey. Scream 6. The sixth Scream movie is one of the worst films, if not the worst film in the series, for a few reasons. Not least that it features the single most deflating and predictable killer reveal in the franchise's history. In the finale, we learn that there are 3 killers for the first time in the series. Detective Wayne Bailey, played by Dermot Mulroney, and kids Quinn and Ethan, played by Liana Liberato and Jack Champion respectively, who were also revealed to be the secret family of one of the previous film's killers, Richie Kirsch, who is played by Jack Quaid in Scream 5, or Scream 2022, whichever way you want to refer to it as. While this might seem like a left field reveal though, Wayne and Quinn were especially easy to guess if you were paying attention, which I wouldn't blame you for not doing because Scream 6 overall, apart from some really good set pieces, isn't great, but yeah, let's get into it. So, firstly, given that this new Ghostface drops masks containing the DNA of previous killers at his crime scenes, who would have access to this other than, someone who worked in law enforcement? Considering that the killer was clearly never gonna be FBI agent Kirby, played by Hayden Panettiere, despite a pretty unconvincing attempt to persuade otherwise, it simply had to be him. Then there's the fact that Quinn is attacked by Ghostface off-screen earlier in the film, making her death and how abruptly the film wants you to forget about her seem, incredibly suspect. Ethan is a little trickier, admittedly, but considering his whereabouts typically aren't accounted for during most of the Ghostface attacks, he's totally guessable too. Next up, Owen Carver, Fountain of Youth. It's almost impressive that Guy Ritchie's semi-recent Apple TV Plus adventure film, Fountain of Youth, presented a surprise villain so hilariously obvious that many assume that they just had to be a fake out. But no, the supposedly terminally ill rich guy, Owen Carver, played by Domhnall Gleeson, really is the not-so-secret villain of the film. as should have been painfully clear to anyone who's seen more than a few movies in their lifetime. Early in the film, Carver charges plucky adventurer Luke Perdue, John Krasinski, with acquiring the Fountain of Youth to cure his cancer. But it's no surprise at all when he reveals in Act 3 that he was never sick at all and simply wanted the fountain's properties for his own material gain. You know, it just kind of feels like a really poor imitation of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And goddamn, Guy Ritchie's track record over the last 5 to 10 years is so hit or miss. This one wasn't it. And yeah, what could be more on brand than a rich guy wanting to hoard an incredible piece of technology and enrich himself? I mean, if Carver hadn't been outed as the antagonist, it would have been absolutely shocking. Next up, Sheriff Newland, Thanksgiving. The moment that Patrick Dempsey was cast in Eli Roth's seasonal slasher film Thanksgiving, many instantly pegged his Sheriff Newland as the killer in question. After all, Dempsey's star profile soars far higher than any other actor in the cast, so why exactly would he simply be playing a lowly police officer and possible victim of murderer John Carver? It's tough to imagine Dempsey signing on for a role like this these days unless he had something more meaty to sink his teeth into. And so it shocked few when he was indeed unveiled as the killer of the film. His motive? Well, he wanted revenge against those he deemed responsible for the Black Friday stampede, which killed his pregnant lover Amanda, played by Gina Gershon, at the start of the movie. Horror fans were also given another major clue in the film's opening Halloween-esque POV shot, which appears to be a fake-out as it cuts to Newland. But in reality, it's a not-so-sly hint that we just saw through the killer's eyes. Plus, you know, Dempsey, for all of his charms, just looks like an intense piece of work. His piercing eyes making him perfect for a role like this. Obvious casting, be damned. Next up, Joanna Worth, G20. Last year's trashy Amazon thriller G20 stars a wildly overqualified Viola Davis as President Danielle Sutton, who is forced to harness her inner John McClane when terrorists attack the G20 conference. It's one of those movies that sounds like a parody Simpsons film that Rainier Wolfcastle would have been in. Why are these getting made? Though the primary villain is Special Forces operative Edwin Rutledge, played by Anthony Starr, later on we learn that he's had some inside help courtesy of Sutton's Treasury Secretary, Joanna Worth, played by Elizabeth Marvel. But anyone who's seen their fair share of, die-hard at-home movies should peg Worth's duplicity in her first major scene, where she's revealed to have been one of Danielle's rivals for the presidential nomination. Gee, why could this possibly be a relevant piece of information? I have no clue. This couldn't possibly, maybe foreshadow her being a villain? For losing the presidential bid. Took the Mob Enforcer character too far there, but, it's just obvious. It's just an obvious neon signposted villain twist and a hallmark of, Amazon's really mid to bad output as a content creator. Ugh, content. Ugh. Next up, Jamie McCabe, Together. While the wild body horror film Together is thankfully about far more than the identity of its overarching villain, it is nevertheless staggeringly obvious who is responsible for Tim and Millie becoming supernaturally entwined. From the moment that Millie's new co-worker Jamie is introduced, there's an unsubtly off vibe about him. His mannerisms and the way he both looks at and talks to Millie suggests he's going to be an important player in the story. We ultimately learn that Jamie is the result of a fusion between himself and his husband, a ritual carried out by a New Age cult in the area, one which Jamie urges Dave Franco and Alison Brie's characters to join. And there's a whole bevy of unsubtle foreshadowing to go along with this. From Jamie being the one who points the pair towards the cave where they drink the tainted water, to Jamie's house having a very culty kind of, vibe to it, and also the deeply sus story about the apparent death of Jamie's husband. In this case, it's not a particularly disappointing reveal because, again, the film is so much more than just the mystery of who's evil, but still, it is pretty predictable. Next up, Ray Bronson, I Know What You Did Last Summer, 2025. So, in theory, the new I Know What You Did Last Summer, having one of its OG heroes be one of the new killers, should have been a totally insane surprise. No matter that it made no damn sense whatsoever. But when Freddie Prinze Jr.'s Ray Bronson was outed as the second hook-wielding killer in the Legacy sequel's climax, many fans had spent the preceding hour just waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's because a kill much earlier in the film basically tips its hand towards Ray being the killer, when in her dying moments, podcaster Tyler removes her killer's hood and says, "You! Gee, I wonder who it's gonna be." Yeah, this immediately narrows the possible pool of killers to only the 4 characters she's met so far. But with Tyler being a fangirl of the original Massacre and all, it's easy to assume that she was indicating the killer is one of the 2 original survivors. And considering that there was no chance in hell that Jennifer Love Hewitt's Julie James would become a killer, it simply had to be Ray. As it was. Look, to take such an insane twist and make it so outrageously predictable with a single line of dialogue is almost impressively sloppy and also just reflective of how bad this movie ended up being. Next up, Ernest Miller, MaXXXine. The middling final entry into Ty West's X-trilogy, MaXXXine, was centered around a serial killer stalking Hollywood in the 1980s, and who ends up targeting the franchise's protagonist, Maxine Minx, played by Mia Goth. The big mystery pertains to the killer's identity, except just about everyone guessed long before the movie's release that it would end up being Maxine's father, Reverend Ernest Miller, played by Simon Prast. Considering that the film itself offers up few other genuinely plausible suspects, and the matter of Maxine's father was left entirely unresolved after being introduced in X, it simply seemed evident that Ernest had to either be the killer himself, or at least, the puppet master behind it all. And indeed, Ernest reveals that he and his acolytes had been filming their murders to make a snuff film with the intent of exposing Hollywood's sinful nature. Yeah, this dead obvious reveal sadly didn't help the perception that MaXXXine was a rather underwhelming conclusion to West's otherwise impressive slasher trilogy. Just a really kind of on-the-nose reveal with on-the-nose commentary, and one that really didn't live up to the legacy that X and Pearl had built up in the previous years.